Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on this webinar. If you're here to learn more about program signaling, then you are in the correct presentation. My name is Sheila Pakdaman from the NRMP, and I am joined by Dr. Dunleavy from the AAMC and Dr. Jurich from the USMLE. We're excited to share our research into the next phase of evaluating program signals, exploring the relationship between signals and match outcomes. By the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of prior research that has been done on program signals, the relationship between program signals and presence on the rank order list, being ranked competitively as well as matching, and the limitations and future directions for the research on the relationship between program signals and match outcomes. With that said, I'll be passing it on to Dana from the AAMC to walk us through some of the background of this research.
Let's start with a quick overview on program signals. Most of us are already familiar with the concept of program signals, but it's important to understand their purpose. Program signals were designed to give all applicants the opportunity to share their genuine interest in a program at the time of application. While applicants report that signals reflect their genuine interest, no empirical evidence has yet linked signals with satisfaction in a program. Program signals should not be overinterpreted or used in isolation. They represent a single indicator of an applicant's preference at a moment in time. Programs should use them alongside other application information about applicants' interests in deciding whom to invite to interview. Programs should not consider signals after the interview because applicants' preferences may change due to personal circumstances or interactions with a particular program. Remember, signals are an indicator of interest, not of qualification. Preference signals have been used in other industries to optimize selection, most notably in economics. They were first introduced to residency selection by Otolaryngology in the 2021 cycle. Building off Otolaryngology's pilot, AAMC began piloting program signals with 3 specialties in 2022 and 16 specialties in 2023. In 2023, we also began exploring large number and 2-tier approaches to signaling. Program signals opened to all specialties for the 2024 cycle. At that time, specialties began learning from each other and started changing their approaches to program signaling. We expect specialties to continue adjusting their approach to signals for a couple years until more data become available. There are 3 approaches to program signaling: small number, large number, and 2-tier. Each has different goals and pros and cons. The small signal approach was born from research in the economics literature. The goal of small signals is to identify applicants' preferences. Small signaling approaches have been around the longest and thus have the most data. The large signal approach is about 3 years old, so there's emerging data. Its goal is to identify general preferences and to distribute signals more widely across programs than small signals have been able to do in the past. The 2-tiered approach is also about 3 years old. It offers applicants both gold and silver signals. It's trying to achieve both goals, identifying applicants' top programs in which they have a genuine interest with the gold signal, and distributing signals more widely across programs with the silver signal. Each approach has different pros and cons and areas of risk. Starting with the pros. Small signals may better reflect genuine interest, and they offer protection to applicants. It's harder to use a signal as a requirement for interview. This offers more protection to the applicant because program directors may not put as much weight on that single variable. The downside is that a small number of signals may not be enough to represent all of the applicant's preferences. Large signals are the opposite. The pro is that signals are distributed more widely across programs. The downside is that many programs can get a lot of signals, so it can be tempting to put too much emphasis on them in deciding whom to invite to interview. Also, their value may be diluted in terms of representing an applicant's genuine interest. The 2-tiered approach is a bit of a mix. The largest pro is that it offers flexibility to applicants, but it's harder to explain, and the difference between gold and silver signals may be artificial. Also, 2-tiered systems distribute signals more evenly across programs. In a 2023 cycle survey of applicants, 80% of respondents reported their signals expressed their genuine interest at the time of applying. Most applicants utilize the maximum number of available signals in their respective specialties, regardless of the signaling approach. There were not substantive differences in the number of signals sent based on applicant race, ethnicity, or gender. On average, IMG and DO applicants sent fewer signals than their MD peers in the large signal specialties and fewer signals in the two-tiered specialties. On average, applicants send more signals to university-affiliated hospitals and to programs with more applicants and residents. In general, there were not differences in the number of signals received based on the percentage of current residents who are URIM, DO, or IMG. Over the last several years, programs have reported consistent use of signals in the review process. 88% of programs reported using signals as a screening tool before a more thorough review. 86% reported using signals as a tiebreaker. 64% reported using this information during the interview as a way to learn why the applicant signaled their program. And 75% of program directors indicated that it helped them identify applicants they would have otherwise overlooked. Over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of research on the relationship between program signals and interview invitation. In 2023, Pletcher et al. Showed that sending a signal increased applicants' odds of interview invitation and that fighting held across demographic groups and gender groups in ENT. Rosenblatt et al. Also replicated these findings in internal medicine, dermatology, and general surgery. Here's a visual to give you a sense of the size of the effect using data from the 2023 general surgery cycle. In that sample, sending a signal increased interview invitation rates substantially, from 9% for those who did not signal compared to 29% for those who did send a signal. However, it's important to note that there was considerable variability in programs' use of signals, as evidenced by the program invitation rates that ranged from about 13 to 50% for folks who signaled. There was much less variability in how programs evaluated applicants who did not signal. Now that you're caught up on the purpose and history of program signaling in GME, let's turn to the current collaboration. Since signals were introduced, the community has been asking us to study their effect at all stages of the transition, from application to interview to match. Thanks to a new collaboration between the USMLE, the AAMC, and NRMP, we are now able to do that. Each organization, as well as OPDO, provided different data to study the relationship between signaling and match outcomes for specialties who participated in program signaling during the 2022 and 2023 cycles. We're approaching this work in phases. In phase 1, we're analyzing data for 7 specialties that participated in signaling during the 22 and 23 cycles and did not change their approach to signaling during that time. During this presentation, we're going to focus on results for general surgery and otolaryngology. In phase 2 of our work, we'll analyze data for all other specialties that participated during the 2023 cycle. Evaluation work will be ongoing from that point forward and include all specialties for the 2024 cycle and beyond. So stay tuned because we'll have lots of data in the future. Our research questions are: 1. What is the relationship between signaling a program and presence on a program's rank order list after controlling for known covariates such as USMLE score and applicant type? 2. What is the relationship between signaling a program and being ranked competitively by a program, that is, existing in the top 25% of their rank order list after controlling for known covariants? And 3. What is the relationship between signaling a program and matching to that program after controlling for known covariates?
Thank you so much, Dana, for providing us that context of the background of program signals and what has been done in the past. From here on, I'm going to be talking to you about the methods used for this study as well as the results. For the methods, in particular the analyses, it was conducted separately for the individual specialties, and the goal was to explore the relationship between sending a signal and the likelihood of being included on the program's rank order list, which I will refer to as RAL. As mentioned earlier, while our plan was to examine all specialties who participate in the main residency match and also participate in signaling, this presentation will focus on two specialties, general surgery and oto. Why did we choose these two specialties? As of when this collaboration launched prior to the 2024 match cycle, these two specialties were among those with multiple years of signaling data. In particular, general surgery was selected as it has the most static signaling structure across years, which allowed us to more easily develop our methodological proof of concept. Contrastly, oto was selected as while its number of signals slightly changed over time, it still utilized a small number of signals. Additionally, oto was the first specialty to implement signaling outside of the ERA system, and much of the work done to date has been done from leveraging data from oto. For our descriptive statistics, while we will be focusing on one outcome of interest for the predictive modeling presented today, we will be presenting descriptive statistics for all three outcomes to help you contextualize the data and to start to give you a flavor of what we're seeing for our two other outcomes. In terms of predictive modeling, we have presented after we've presented on the descriptive findings across all three outcomes, we will drill down into our RAL inclusion outcome using predictive modeling for the conciseness and clarity of the findings. We utilize a multi-level approach, predicting an applicant's likelihood of being included on a program's RAL. Now I wanted to go over why we used a multi-level modeling or MLM approach. As the primary goal was to evaluate the likelihood of applicants being included on the RAL across different specialties. We wanted to look at a MLM because MLMs are a type of regression model that allow us to account for grouping of data. As you can see from this diagram here, we have this at two levels. At the first level here, it's based on applications from different applicants. And at the second level here, we have programs, meaning that all the applications are nested or grouped by program. Inclusion of these key variables in the MLM enables us to include all critical variables of interest, such as signal status, step 1 scores, signal to application ratio, and application type, without needing to exclude variables due to insufficient data size. An MLM does not require a large number of applications within each program, which is that level 1 data here. And this allows us to retain more programs in our sample and avoid excluding smaller programs that might have otherwise been lost in a typical regression model. Also, we were able to examine the between program effects, and this allows us to look at program level variables such as the signal to application ratio, which influences the likelihood of RAL inclusion. We can distinguish between the effects within programs, how variables affect RAL inclusion within a single program and between programs, how program level characteristics influence differences across those programs. So overall, the MLM approach allows us to address the complexity of our data while retaining all these relevant variables and programs, and provides us a clearer understanding of the factors affecting RAL inclusion, ensuring that our findings are both comprehensive and actionable. Just to provide us here with a visual of the MLM model, we tested several different models here. And so for model 1, it is that signal only. For model 2, we went ahead and added in applicant type, which is categorized as MD, DO, USIMG, and non-USIMG applicants. For model 3, we took everything from models 1 and 2 and also added in geographic location, meaning if the medical school state and the program state are same or different. For model 4, we added on to that and we added in step 1 scores. For model 5, we added on to that and added in that signal to application ratio, which here is defined as wanting to account for the number of signals a program received, as we know there are a select number of programs who receive a large portion of signals, but we also wanted to take it into account the total number of applications a program received, hence this ratio. For Model 6, we added in the signal and location interaction, and for Model 7, we added in the signal and step 1 interaction. We did the best fit model here, which means we compare the AIC and BIC values, and Model 6, which is everything from signal only all the way to this signal times location interaction, was consistently the most parsimonious and best fitting model across all specialties. So that is the model that made it into the final analyses. Now let's get into our results. First, we'll be starting off with our general surgery results. On this slide, you can see the methods for our 2023 general surgery sample. This is some high-level information regarding our sample and the number of general surgery programs that were included in our analyses, which was based on the number of programs with a raw length of at least 30, was 254. Among this sample, nearly 186,000 applications were submitted by approximately 3,300 applicants, leading to programs receiving a median of nearly 1,200 applications. The median program raw length among the sample was 71. For general surgery, as a reminder, the number of signals each applicant received in both 2022 and 2023 was 5. And additionally, for purposes of these analyses, missing data is excluded. So now I want to go over our descriptive statistics for the raw inclusion. And before getting into it, I just wanted to let you know that across all descriptive slides, utilizing these box plots that you will see, the percentages are calculated at the program year level, and then the results are aggregated into these box plots. So focusing on box plot 1 here, which is the percentage on the raw or not on the raw that signaled versus did not signal, we see here in these green box plots, for those that did not signal, 6.9% ended up being ranked, whereas for those that did signal, 25.8% ended up being ranked. So this data suggests that applicants who signal have a higher likelihood of being included on the raw compared to those that didn't signal. This is evidenced by those higher percentages of being ranked on the signal side of the box plot compared to our non-signalers here. Moving over to box plot 2, this is the percentage on the raw that signaled versus did not signal. This box plot represents the composition of the raw itself, showing the percentage of people on the raw who either signaled or didn't signal. So 80.3% of this raw is comprised of applicants that did not signal the program, whereas 19.7% of the raw is comprised of applicants that sent a signal to the program. So what we're seeing here is that even though signaling increases the likelihood of being included on the raw, as we see with this first box plot, the overall raw is still predominantly comprised of applicants who did not signal. This is reflected by the fact that there's a much higher percentage of non-signalers that make up the raw. Now let's get into our MLM results for general surgery. I'm just going to give you an overview of how to interpret this image here. So the odds ratio for each predictor are displayed as these blue circles. And then the red dashed line inside of them denotes the standard deviation, also known as the variance of that predictor. The horizontal red dashed line here demonstrates an odds ratio of 1, which is our base likelihood. Therefore, values that are above that indicate odds ratios larger than 1, which means that predictor increases the likelihood of being ranked, whereas predictors below the red dashed line denote odds ratios less than 1, which means that predictor decrease the likelihood of being ranked. So let's get into it. Looking at our signal predictor, applicants who sent a signal were 5.91 times more likely to be ranked compared to those who didn't send a signal. Now, breaking it down by applicant type, DOs, US IMGs, and non-US IMGs. For DO applicants, they were 1.96 times less likely to be ranked compared to their MD peers. For US IMGs and non-US IMGs, they were both 8.33 times less likely to be ranked when compared to their MD peers. For location, applicants whose UME was in the same state as the program were 3.49 times more likely to be ranked. For step 1 score, having a step 1 score 1 standard deviation above the mean was associated with 1.76 times more likely to be ranked. And for that signal to application ratio, applications to programs with a signal to application ratio 1 standard deviation above the mean were associated with 1.33 times less likely of being ranked. And now for a signal and location interaction. When the applicant was from the same state as the program, the effect of sending a signal on the likelihood of being ranked decreased by a factor of 2.5. And what that means is that this doesn't indicate an overall decrease in the likelihood of being ranked. Rather, it means that the combined positive effects of sending a signal and being from the same state are less pronounced when both of these factors are present. In other words, the signal has a stronger effect on applicants from out of state compared to those from the same state. When both the signal and the state alignment are present, the signal's impact is slightly diminished compared to when the applicant is from a different state. Now we're going to share some descriptive statistics on the competitive role. So the box plot here on the left is the percentage of applications ranked competitively or not ranked competitively, which we defined here as the top 25th percentile that signaled versus didn't signal. So here we see that for those that did not signal, 27.4% ended up being ranked competitively, whereas for those that did signal, 30.1% ended up being ranked competitively. This data suggests that applicants who signal have a marginally better likelihood of being ranked competitively compared to those who didn't signal. This is evidenced by that slightly higher percentage of ranked competitively on the signal slide of this box plot compared to our non-signalers here. So the main takeaway is that even though signaling increases the likelihood of being ranked competitively, as we see with that first box plot, the overall competitive portion of the role is still predominantly comprised of applicants who didn't signal. And lastly, we want to go over our matching descriptive statistics here. So focusing on this box plot here on the left, it shows the percentage of matching to that program versus not matching to that program based on whether they signaled or did not signal. So looking at the green box plots, for those that didn't signal, 6.6% ended up matching to that program, whereas for those that did signal, 14.4% ended up matching to that program. And this data suggests that applicants who signal have a higher likelihood of matching to that program compared to those that did not signal. And that's evidenced by the higher percentages of match to that program on the signal side of the box plot compared to our non-signalers. I wanted to go over all the information that I just shared with you because I do know it is a lot. So in conclusion, for our general surgery results, the effect of signaling appears strongest for inclusion on the roll. There are some factors that increase the likelihood of being ranked. These include sending a signal, applications where the program and the applicant are from the same state, and having a step 1 score 1 standard deviation above the mean. Contrastly, there's factors that decrease the likelihood of being ranked. These include being a DO or IMG applicant, applications at programs with a signal to applicant ratio 1 standard deviation above the mean. And for our interaction there, the strength of a signal is smaller when the applicant is from the same state. While signaling increases an applicant's likelihood of being ranked, an applicant does not have to have signaled a program to be ranked competitively in that top 25th percentile or match to that program. Now I want to get into the results for ODO. Here we have an overview of our ODO sample. We use the same program inclusion criteria as we did with GenSurge, meaning that programs with a minimum of a raw length of 30 were included into the sample. We see that the number of programs included in ODO was less than half of GenSurge, 100 versus 254, which is unsurprising given ODO is a smaller specialty overall. Among this sample, we also see drastically fewer applications being submitted. 32,000 applications were submitted, resulting in programs receiving a median of 409 applications, which is a third of the 1,200 applications that were received by programs in general surgery. The median program raw length was 48, which is nearly half of GenSurge. And for ODO, applicants received 7 signals in 2023, and the number of signals in 2022 was slightly lower, where there is 4, but this difference did not affect modeling. Now we're going to get into our descriptive statistics, starting with the raw inclusion for ODO. And just as a reminder, as with general surgery, percentages are calculated at the program year level, and then the results are aggregated into these box plots. Additionally, there are some differences to note between general surgery and ODO. Beyond specialty differences, the overall sample size between the samples are significantly different, with general surgery having 186,000 applications in 2023, whereas ODO had 32,000 applications in 2023. Additionally, the differences exist in the application to raw ratios. For general surgery, only 8% of the applications ended up being ranked, whereas for ODO, 12.7% of the applications ended up being ranked. With that said, I am going to get started with box plot 1 over here. And so results for ODO are similar to what we saw for GenSurge, except the effect of a signal on being ranked seems to be much stronger for ODO than for general surgery. So here we see that only 9.5% of applications who did not signal ended up in being in the raw, whereas on the other hand, we see that 50.8% of signals ended up being placed on the raw. So therefore for ODO, the likelihood of being ranked, given whether you signaled or did not signal, increases from 9.5% if you didn't signal to 50.8% if you did signal. Whereas for general surgery, that likelihood increased from 7% to 26%. For our MLM results, we have for the signal predictor, we have applicants who sent a signal. They were 12.9 times more likely to be ranked compared to those who didn't send a signal. And then breaking it down by applicant type, DO applicants were 10 times less likely to be ranked compared to their MD peers. And then for US IMG applicants, they were 3.7 times less likely to be ranked compared to their MD peers. Whereas for non-US IMG applicants, they were 4 times less likely to be ranked when compared to their MD peers. Continuing on with our MLM results here, for location, applicants whose UME was in the same state as the program were 5.64 times more likely to be ranked. For step 1 score, having a step 1 score 1 standard deviation above the mean was associated with 1.38 times more likely to be ranked. And then for that signal to application ratio, applications to programs with a signal to an application ratio 1 standard deviation above the mean was associated with being 1.3 times less likely of being ranked. And finally, looking at our signal and location interaction, when the applicant was from the same state as the program, the effect of sending a signal on the likelihood of being ranked decreased by a factor of 4.17. And this doesn't indicate an overall decrease in the likelihood of being ranked. Rather, it means that the combined positive effects of sending a signal and being from the same state are less pronounced when both factors are present. In other words, the signal has a stronger effect on the applicants from out of state compared to those from the same state. When both the signal and state alignment are present, the signal's impact is slightly diminished compared to when the applicant is from a different state. Now looking at the competitive role descriptive statistics here, we see that for this first box plot, the results for Odo are similar to the results that we saw with general surgery. The effect of signal on being ranked competitively appears slightly smaller for Odo than for general surgery. Additionally, looking at these green box plots, applicants who did not send a signal have roughly the same chance of being ranked competitively, 26.4%, than those that did send a signal, 26.7%. Now looking at the descriptive statistics for matching, results for Odo were similar to what we saw with GenSurge, except the overall percentage of signals that resulted in matching is slightly smaller for Odo than GenSurge. So looking at these green box plots over here on the left, the effect of a signal versus no signal on matching was similar between the two specialties. For Odo, applicants who signal a program, they have roughly double the chance of matching to that program, which is 10.5%, compared to applicants who did not signal the program, which is 5.5%. So this is a comparison here. So wrapping up, in conclusion for Odo, the results for Odo, as mentioned, are similar to the results that we saw for GenSurge, except for the effect of the signal on being ranked seems to be much stronger for Odo with an odds ratio of 12.9 than for general surgery with an odds ratio of 5.91. Additionally, an applicant does not have to have signaled a program to be ranked, something that we also see in the competitive ranking, that top 25th percentile, and match data. Similarly to general surgery, factors that increase the likelihood of being ranked included sending a signal, applications where the program and the applicant were from the same state, and having a step 1 score 1 standard deviation above the mean. Conversely, there were some factors that decrease the likelihood of being ranked, being a DO or IMG applicant, as well as applications at programs with a signal to application ratio 1 standard deviation above the mean. Lastly, for our interaction, the strength of the signal is smaller when the applicant is from the same state. With that said, I will hand it over to Dan to talk about our conclusions, limitations, and future directions.
Thanks, Sheila. To close out our presentation, I want to synthesize the detailed information that Sheila provided into some broad conclusions. I'll also highlight limitations of our study and outline future directions that attempt to address these limitations and others that expand the scope of our research. In terms of overall conclusions, the primary takeaway is that the effect of signaling is strong. It was particularly strong for the inclusion on a rank order list, and as we saw across our different models, the effect of signaling was stronger than any of the other comparable or categorical variables that we considered. Yes, signaling is not deterministic. We see individuals who do not signal still appear on rank order lists, for example, but those who did signal had a much higher chance of appearing on the roll. Given that, it's important to monitor and share information about the use of signals because the intent was for these tools to serve as one of many data points within the process of holistic review. And so for applicants to make informed decisions, we're going to need transparency around this process, transparency from organizations such as ours that have access to the data, transparency from specialty leaders on the purpose and structure of the signal process, and transparency from individual programs on how they evaluate applicants who do signal. In terms of other conclusions, I mentioned that the effect of signals was strongest for rank order list inclusion. I want to reiterate that we did see the effect present, but to a lesser extent as we go through the application process. Recall Sheila showed those shrinking differences in the box plots as we looked at the difference between signaling and not signaling for competitive ranking and matching. These results parallel what we've seen in past AAMC work with how signaling is a very powerful influence on the interview invitation outcome as well. The effective signaling and other variables that we explored were also consistent between the two specialties, but we did see a stronger magnitude for the effect of signaling in Oto. And although we do see those consistent overall trends within specialties, it's important to reiterate that there is variability in how individual programs evaluate signals. This reinforces that need for programs to be transparent about their approach so applicants can understand the value of a signal for any given program. When drawing conclusions from this study, it's important to consider the limitations. First, we cannot account for all the possible variables influential to the residency selection process. For example, we did not include interview data, which can moderate the relationship between signals and other residency outcomes based on how an applicant performs. There are other data we know are conceptually relevant, but we don't have access to, such as data on home program or away rotations. Furthermore, there are additional data points of interest we have access to, such as other demographic characteristics, but are unable to include in our statistical models due to sample size concerns. Second, as we only explored applicants with USMLE performance, the results presented here do not generalize to osteopathic applicants without USMLE Step 1 scores. It's also important to consider that we cannot verify how programs complied with signaling recommendations. This limitation is particularly relevant when considering policies around home student and away rotators signaling. Programs taking a different approach to requiring signaling here can distort the results and potentially inflate the likelihood that applicants who did not signal appear on a rank order list. Recall that both general surgery and Oto allowed only a small number of signals during this time period. We anticipate then that our results would not generalize directly to specialties utilizing large number of signals and/or those who use a tiered signaling approach. And last, the transition to Step 1 pass-fail coincided with the broader adoption of signaling. As this transition reconceptualizes how scores are used in residency selection, we can no longer leverage or interpret Step 1 score information in the same way that we have for our 2022 and 2023 analyses. Closing with some future directions, our next step for this work involves extending our analyses to numerous other specialties. In addition, as the number, use, and evaluation of signals continues to evolve, we plan to investigate the effect of signaling on the 2024 cycle data and hopefully beyond. There are also variations to our current analysis that we're considering for future work, many of which relate to addressing the previously covered limitations. First, due to the transition of Step 1 to pass-fail, few applicants have Step 1 scores, and even fewer will have these scores moving forward. Thus, we intend to include Step 2 CK scores to account for this exam's likely increased influence in the selection process in the future. As we noted on the previous slide, the results presented today do not generalize to osteopathic applicants without Step 1. We hope to incorporate COMLEX scores into these analyses to account for this in a future iteration of our work. And finally, I mentioned that home program and away rotations are critical factors in the selection process. We are exploring options to obtain this information or proxy variables that may be available to address this important unknown. We appreciate you listening to our presentation and look forward to sharing more results from this research in the future. Thank you.